Welcome to Time Travelling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Paddy.
And I'm Tricia. In today's Rambling in the TARDIS, we take a look back at Stephen. We'll be talking about his strengths and his weaknesses and picking out his best and worst episodes.
We would also love to hear your thoughts on Stephen and any of the stories that he's been in. So in order to join in the discussion, you can check us out at Time Team, that's TIMETEAMP, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. So, Trish, this is going to be a fun one, I think.
I'm going to try and be nice.
Yes, we're objective. We're serious podcast people.
Yeah. Serious-ish.
Serious-ish.
So, being positive, shall we start off with Mr. Stephen's strengths?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, because like that's the format we've done for everyone else, so I think we might as well just do it that way. So, what would you consider to be Mr. Stephen Taylor's, not Tyler, two completely different people, Mr. Stephen Taylor's strengths?
For me, his biggest strength, and it's not one that he shows to everyone or all the time, but when it does shine through, I think it's incredibly powerful, is the level of care he has for his travelling companions. I'm thinking specifically what comes to mind is the end of the Mythmakers and the beginning of Dalek's Master Plan, when all he cares about is where is Vicky, and that is the only thing on his mind, is making sure that Vicky's okay. And he doesn't do that all the time, sadly, and we'll get to that later on, but when he does do it, it comes across as incredibly genuine.
Yeah.
You know, we saw it again in in the massacre with Anne.
Yeah.
You know, where he doesn't even know this person, but he just feels this connection and he gets very protective. And I think for those that he has that connection with, that's a very strong part of his personality, is the desire to protect or at least make sure that that person is okay. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I've done as a strength, and this may seem like it's me reaching out where I may not see distinct advantages, but it's one of the things that made me like him the most when we watched The Chase and when we watched the Time Meddler. The Time Meddler. He nearly sacrificed everything to go back and save his teddy bear.
And that resonates with you.
It really does.
I think
it really does.
But I think it resonates with anyone that's like still attached to like those childhood mementos, like, because there are a lot of people, and like, there's no shame or anything like that. People can still sleep with teddies, like.
Yeah, but I think it's also like it highlighted the fact that he was alone for so long, and that bear was perhaps his one connection to his sanity. So I liked the fact that he went back to get it and that he brought it onto the TARDIS. And I was disappointed we never got to see it again, because where the hell is Hi-Fi and like, you know.
I don't know. I because like again I just have like the comparisons to Tom Hanks and Castaway, like, so I was just like I think maybe Tom Hanks saw The Chase and he was like, oh, I like that guy's story, I know I'll make a movie, but I'll make it slightly more realistic.
Yeah, maybe. So what did you think? Those were the two big strengths I could come up with, to be honest. We'll probably talk more in terms of his best and worst episodes and overall about some of the smaller things, but those were the two big things about Stephen that, like, when I think of Stephen in a positive light, those are the two things that come into my mind. So how about you? What did you think were his strengths?
Alright, so this one now is going to kind of potentially lead into a weakness as well, right? But one strength that he has is that he is very willing to put himself between danger and his travelling companions. And I think like the best examples of this are probably the Mythmakers and the Savages, where he was like doing the delaying action against the elders by staying back in the forest. Because like what we know of Stephen is that he was a pilot. He was a space pilot. Now, we don't know whether that was he was a fighter pilot. We don't know whether he was a commercial pilot. We don't know. There's no indication. At least I don't think there's any indication from The Chase as to what he was.
No, I don't think so. There
Yeah.
may be in the book, but
Yeah.
I don't think there was in the episode itself.
Because he did make reference to the colonization wars. No,
Yeah.
that could just be he actually took part in it, but anyway, we know that he's a pilot. So, but he has that thing of like, where he will willingly put himself into the face of danger, and the sort of like, you want them, you got to get through me side of things. And I suppose like the other, see again, that would be his chief strength, and I think that would be like the overall kind of beacon of it. Honestly, that's all I got. I would be kind of again reaching just to find anything else that I thought was a real big strength in Stephen, because like we've mentioned multiple times across the stories that we did, for all the good he seemed to do in those episodes, there's an awful lot of X or like to back up the Y,
Yeah. I think you're right in terms of he is always willing and able to put himself on the line in a very similar way to how Ian was. Ian was always willing to stay behind and always willing to be the one to fight to protect the others. And I think that sort of ties in nice at what I said, in that he cares a great deal about people that he has a connection with.
Yeah. And
those two things sort of feed off together. I think that's kind of what he was designed to be as a character. And
like I was going to say, another strength he has, but it actually falls into the same thing, willing to put himself into danger to save his friends, was the moment in Galaxy 4 where he refused to be Maga's pawn by staying in the airlock, But that falls into the same vein of willing to put himself into danger to save the others.
Also slightly dumb, though.
Yeah, but but see, that's where I suppose the weakness component of it, when we get to the weakness, will come into it.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we've said for, I think, pretty much all of our companions that we've discussed previously is a lot of their strengths can feed into weaknesses over time. And that's the same thing with anyone. I mean, to go with a sort of work phrase, you can over-index in a certain area, and that becomes a negative thing.
Yeah.
We saw it with even, like with Barbara and her compassion. Like, sometimes it was at the really wrong moment.
Exactly. Like, and I remember like commenting on it back when we did An Unearthly Child, that I thought it was like, I'm not so quite sure. Like, if this was my first time watching it, and that was like my first introduction to Barbara, I'd be kind of like, I can see where maybe people are getting this idea of, the old companions were just, damsels in distress. But having watched it before and then coming back to it, it's still a very unusual thing to process. But then it actually kind of makes her the character that she is. But this is Stephen's rambling episode, not Barbara's rambling episode.
Yeah, well, the point being that we,
yeah.
We've made similar comments about other companions in the past. This isn't just us picking on Stephen.
Yeah, exactly.
But going over to us picking on Stephen. We also do have to discuss his weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few.
As do I.
Do you want to go first?
I will. Because again, I will see what I can say that maybe kind of preempts you, so that we'll have
so I'm not ranting as much as what he's trying to say.
Pretty much. So, first and foremost, he is very impulsive.
Yes.
And that impulsiveness does, put him into scenarios where he is forced to help save his friends, and like, he usually excels in that. But if you weren't so impulsive, we wouldn't be in the scenario in the first place. Prime example is the Time Meddler.
Yeah.
And he reminds me of there's a character in Earthworm Jim, when they're doing like this Wizard of Oz parody. He's like the incredibly brave hamster, and she's like, I can't stop being brave. Oh, look, a big truck. And he just jumps right into its path. And it's just like, this time no thought of the consequences whatsoever. So yeah, he's impulsive. He's petulant, which leads to his impulsiveness. So like that, and his petulance can make him come across as a real blockhead at times. And the other thing that I have is this unwarranted condescending nature he has specifically towards Dodo. He had a bit of it with Vicky, and not in the sort of like kind of, you know, older brother banter way that he had with her in the Mythmakers. Like in the Time Meddler and even in Galaxy 4, it was this, oh, you're just a girl type mentality. And so that, and then that travelled completely into Dodo, unlike unwarranted, as like we talked about there just recently when we did the Ark. Like, it was like, oh, you better be careful, she'll have the whole lot down on us. You've known her for a grand total of an hour. Who are you to say what she's capable of? Like, this type of shit. So, like, I get that he was positioned to be the strong, like the action man character, but he comes across as more of a bumbler, and like, yeah, he's the action man, but there's no brains behind the brawn as such.
Yeah.
So how many of your index cards did I check off there that would
You got a few. So I do have down that he's so impatient and petulant. The impatience really, I mean, you have impulsiveness, which you mentioned, but the impatientness is actually slightly separate from that. You know, we saw it in Galaxy 4, we saw it in the Daleks Master Plan, where it's constantly, but what are we doing? But what are we doing? But how long is left? It's like, just allow things to happen, and eventually they will balance out.
Yeah.
Do you know? You know, you mentioned that his impulsiveness can get them in trouble. He is a major hothead. You know, like randomly body slamming random people he doesn't even fucking know.
And losing.
For no reason. I think one of my biggest issues with Stephen, and it sort of carries over into the comments that he makes about Dodo, and to be honest, the arc was bad because he barely knew her, but the Savages was worse.
Yeah.
Like, he made so many comments in the Savages, like when she wandered off.
Yeah.
And he was with these people that they don't know. He made so many disparaging comments about her. No, even Dodo couldn't be that stupid. And you're like, shut up.
And like, the thing is as well as that, like, not even Dodo would be that stupid. Where the previous adventure to the Savages was the gunfighters, where he comes out looking like a fucking tool.
Yeah, and you know what I think what really bothers me about him when you compare him with other action man male companions, and I don't just mean Ian. You know, I've seen several other series of the show. So if you think about Harry, if you think about Captain Jack, if you think about Mickey, if you think about Rory, like if you think about any of the other male companions, I think the biggest thing that bothers me about Stephen is his ego. He is so up his own arse.
And like, you make a very interesting comment there in relation to Harry, and like, or those other companions, is because all those other companions, in my mind, have one thing in common. And like, this is for people that are only getting into Who through the podcast. These are later companions that serve like with the 4th, 9th, and 10th Doctors respectively, or the 11th Doctor as well. Like, Harry is he's a public school educated. He's an old boy essentially, and he's very, you know, old girl to the companions that he's with, but he's never presented as anything other than that. In terms of like that's who he is, that's his makeup, and he has like the other good qualities that take away from that kind of toughish exterior, but that's his initial portrayal. Whereas with Stephen is that I think it's the other way around. Stephen is portrayed as this new Ian essentially, and like, he is filling the role of Ian, but he doesn't have any of the, I would say, warmth.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between the two is that yes, Ian was willing to jump in, and that's the whole reason why William Russell was hired. He was hired because of the adventures of Sir Lancelot. He was hired to be the swashbuckling hero type, right? And
in Tricia's estimation, also hired because of his ass.
Yeah, no, that ties together. But the difference between Ian, between Harry, even between Jack, who has an ego the size of the fucking moon, and Stephen, is that they are smart enough to know when to back down, when to defer. And Stephen isn't. Stephen thinks that the only right way is his way. The only one who can do something is him. And I still, like, it will always stick with me in the Daleks' master plan. When you have Sarah Kingdom coming in, who's from further in the future than Stephen is.
Yeah.
And suddenly he's presented with, I don't want to present this as sexist, but okay. He's presented with a woman who is further advanced than him, is smarter than him, is more military minded than him, and who is older than him. Vicky was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Katerina was younger and also less technologically intelligent, shall we say, put that way. And the way he treats her when she dismisses an idea of his, the sort of petulant throwing his toys out of the pram because I had this idea and it must be brilliant because it was mine. Never mind, you have someone from like 1,000 years in the future from me again, and a guy who travels in time telling me it's a bad idea. And then he nearly fucking killed himself.
Like, I didn't read a sexist angle into it. I just thought it was the fact of, you know, oh, I'm the experienced one here because it's me and the doctor. You're just Johnny come lately, or in this case, Janie come lately. And, or no, Jeannie come lately because Jean Marsh. No, that's the way I read it. And it was like, and look, we've even seen it when I made the reference of, does he seem like the kind of guy that would try to disable a futuristic landmine? That was from a role-playing session that myself and Trish had with a group of friends, and one of the lads just couldn't stand to be outshone, so he decided to do this thing, and it just ended up blowing up in his face, much like Stephen did.
Yeah. I don't think it's a sexist thing, and we've discussed on the show before, is Stephen sexist or not? We've discussed that previously. I don't think it is, but I think it's an interesting comparison that, you know, Vicky and Katerina were young women who were younger than him.
Yeah.
And he was from further in the future than them. And there's that. So I don't think it's a sexist thing, but I think it would be a misstep not to mention the fact that all of his interactions are with women. Like, we don't have another male companion.
Yeah. Well,
you know?
We had our discussion about Brett, and
yes, I did my own thing. I forgot about Brett, and he was dick to Brett as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, there was a lot to unpack. Even just like that one story, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I said so. I think the issue that I have with him is all of the impatientness, the petulantness, the hot-headedness, and the mean things he says. It all centers back to his ego. And they never try to explain it. They never acknowledge that it's not a good thing. You never have the doctor criticizing him for, you know, what he says about people. You know, it's just nothing's commented on, and that bothers me.
Yeah.
So we should probably go back on the upswing a little bit. So usually at this point we will discuss what we felt were the best episodes for the character and the worst episodes. Now, I said this to Paddy during the week. Because of my read on the character of Stephen, I have a best episode, some worst episodes, and then I have some middling ones. And the middling ones are, I was not a fan of them. But if you are a Stephen fan, these are probably going to be good stories for you. And that was kind of the way I did them, because I have said I'm not a fan of Stephen, but I know some people are. So, in my estimation, you know, if you are a fan of Stephen, I've got a couple of episodes there in the middle that you'd probably love for the contributions that he makes and stuff like that. So that's the way I've done my best and worst episodes this week. Slight deviation from the norm, but kind of required.
Yeah. So, I went first on the weaknesses, so you can go first on the positives.
Cool. So, do you want to go worst to best or best to worst?
Like our friends at Half Measures refer, how about we do a 3, 2, 1? So number 3 down to number 1.
Okay. So worst first. My worst episodes for Stephen. Okay, just to clarify, I only have one best episode.
Right, so I got it wrong. I thought we were doing the worst to best in the best category, and then the middling category, and then the.
I don't have a scale in my best category.
Okay.
So we'll go with the best episodes first.
Fair
okay,
enough.
so my best episode for Stephen, and this is like hand on heart, I think the one story where I could get behind Stephen as a character. He had a slight bumble at the beginning that bothered me, but it was very small, and that is the Mythmakers. I think it's a great portrayal of all of the strengths that we have discussed about him before.
Yeah.
It has him caring for his companions, both the Doctor and Vicky.
Yeah.
It has him willing to step in where he doesn't have to. Putting himself on the line, going out dressed in Greek armor. He was willing to put himself on the line. I think it's a really strong showing of the best of the character.
Also has a bit of barber bullshittery. Oh, mighty Paris, you have defeated me. I have.
Yeah,
yes, I have.
Barber bullshitter, which is great. But I think for me, the Mythmakers, it really showed who Stephen could be when they wrote him well. And when they had him contributing as part of the whole, rather than him being almost trying to be like the Lone Ranger and doing his own thing and his thing is the best. He got to have good discussions with the Doctor. He got to have good discussions with Vicky. I love the sort of brotherly, sisterly relationship we got to see between the two of them.
Yeah.
And like I said, at the end, she's all he thinks about. And his one thing is that he's been mortally wounded and all he cares about is Vicky okay? And for me, like, forgetting everything else I've said about him over the last number of weeks, that is an amazing story with some amazing moments in it for him. So that's my best episode for Stephen.
Yeah.
How about you?
I am in complete agreement with you. This is the best showing for Stephen. And this I think is the first thing in what will become a trend, is that everyone has a different favorite companion. Okay? You're just not everyone's going to be on the same page. It's just the way that it is. However, everyone will probably agree that even companions that they don't like have one good story, have one standout story for them. And yeah, the Mythmakers is Stephen's. His intelligence showing, like the whole, like, how about we actually use the wooden horse of Troy as a ploy, and it's like, actually not it's staring you right in the face, because like some people, again, they don't kind of see that stuff, So yeah, no, really good intelligence. Again, barber bullshittery when he takes on Paris. Again, up there with some of the finer Ian moments in terms of putting himself into danger by actually fighting Greek soldiers Trojan soldiers during the sacking of Troy. And this is a guy now that has no formalized sword fighting training or anything like that.
As far as we know.
As far as we know. Well, that's true. So yeah, look, again, it was just, this is the best bits of Stephen. So the Mythmakers is probably, it's a great story in and of itself. Like, as we talked about it on the last day. Can't wait for it to be animated. And last, fuck you to John Wiles. But no, like for Stephen fans, I'd say that this is the best story you'll get for Stephen. Yeah.
Did you have any other best episodes on your list?
No, everything else kind of fell into the sort of the middling category.
Okay.
So like, yeah, that's like, I went through everything because like all the other companions, like we went through the stories as a whole to see, can we pick a story that they're rock solid the whole way through. And this for me, and Steve, this is the only story for me where Stephen is rock solid the whole way through.
Yeah, I have a slight issue with the minor bit at the beginning, but that's so minor. And like you said, she did have a hurt ankle.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's so small. So if we go on to the middling episodes, I have two.
I could be really bitchy and say Mission to the Unknown because he's not in it, but
so I have two middling episodes, and then just to give you a heads up, I have two worst episodes.
Okay.
Everything else, I'm sort of meh.
I have one middling, and I have three worst.
Okay, well, how about we do my middling first, and we can see if one of them overlaps with yours.
Okay.
So the two middling ones that I had were the Massacre
Mm-hmm.
and the Savages.
Okay.
So the Massacre, like I said, this is like my middling ones are ones that I personally wasn't a fan of. But if you're a fan of Steven, you will love these. That was sort of my way of measuring them. So the Massacre is literally, you might as well rename the show to Steven Taylor rather than Doctor Who.
Yeah.
The majority of the story, bar that one scene in the alchemist shop, the majority of the story is told from Steven's point of view.
Yeah.
Versus the Doctor's point of view. Do you know? And it's all about Steven making his way through this historical period, the connections he's making, the subterfuge and whatever. Personally, I don't like it because I feel that he just bumbles from scene to scene and doesn't actually do much. However, if you're a fan of him, this is literally a 4-episode story where he is, of our traveling group, he is front and center. And you get to see what he's like by himself, completely detached from anyone. He can't get back into the TARDIS, he can't find the Doctor, and he's trying to work his way through the problem. Not my favourite, because I don't think they did it very well, but I also don't like him, so maybe that's why I didn't think they did it very well.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of him, though, I think that's definitely, it's going to be one of your top watches, I think, if you're a fan of Steven. The Savages, that was an interesting one, because I did struggle between putting the Savages actually on the list of his best episodes. But again, it's not my best episode for him. Again, if you're a fan of Steven, I'd say the Savages is probably right there under Mythmakers. If you're a fan of Steven, I think Savages is probably going to be your second pick, if I had to guess, because again, we see Steven having the powerful role, leading revolution, being the strong guy, being the one to save the day, and at the end, he gets the reward of all of that. Do you know? He gets recognized as someone who can lead these people into a better future, and like we said, inevitably becomes king of this planet. The reason why it's not one of my favorites, even though, looking just at Steven from a fan perspective, you're probably like, he has great scenes here, he has great discussions here, great action moments or whatever. But he is such a dick. Like, he is such a dick throughout. The things that he says about Dodo, I'm like, you really, really need to cop yourself on and, stop being so cruel to people by bad talking them to others, because it's absolutely ridiculous. And we said earlier in the week, personally, I didn't think he earned the ending that he got.
Yeah.
If it had been him staying and fighting with them to overthrow the other elders, I would have been all for that. That would have been fine. I would have had no issue with that. But the idea of him leading these people, no. That and his interactions with Dodo are why the Savages for me is a middling episode for Steven. Because has some great moments, but oh good god, like, you have to get through him being Steven in order to enjoy them. So those are my two middling episodes. Were either of those one of yours?
No. Well,
really?
On hearing you speak about it now, I probably would put the Savages as a middling episode, because it definitely spoke to his strengths, about being at least like some bit good, with tactics as well, because using the mirror to blind the guard, to disarm him, and doing the hit and run and that kind of stuff, and again I think it's a complete cop-out ending, but at least it works out well for Steven in the end. The other one that I would put as a middling, and this is a rough middling, okay, is Galaxy 4, because the last half of it, he's a annoying pain in the ass. Because it's like, it's like, literally, well, what does this clock say? No, what does that clock say? No, what does this clock say? And it's just like, shut up. Shut up. You have just come from, quite possibly, the most inept group of antagonists we've come across thus far. You were in I won't say the custody. You're in this company of a highly advanced species with nearly indestructible robots. What? They've assured you it's all okay. Take them at their word. Just. However, the first half of it, despite what Peter Purves has said about the writing of the character seems to have improved a lot from the Time Meddler. He's a lot more calm. He's a lot more focused. He's a lot more intelligent. Trying to get the MAGA clone on his, the Draven clone on his side, showing great integrity of character. By I'm not going to be your pawn, kind of like Nat from Test of Nerve.
Don't compare those two.
No, I'm not comparing them as like equals, but I'm saying it's in the vein of. Yeah. Which is it's a Big Finish story. Definitely check it out. But it's a tale of two halves with Stephen in that one, and I think it's a fair middling one.
And did you have any other middling?
No.
No, it was just the one middling episode you had, is it?
Well, I've taken over the Savages now as well, because you made some valid points about that, and it kind of got me thinking about stuff. So yeah, I would say that's a middling. And
then we're on to his worst episodes. Again, in this case, I have 2.
And I have 3.
Do you want to go first, or will I go first?
I'll go first. So, I'm not sure if there's, I don't think there's any particular order I would do this in. Because I haven't done... Actually, do what? I will do them in a particular order. In how much it annoyed me.
Cool. I will do mine in my head the same way.
Okay, cool. So, in third place in the worst episodes is the Daleks' Master Plan, because he spends the entire story. He spends the first part at odds with Brett when he could be kind of working together. They do have their moments of working together, but it's still he's almost trying to. Not show up Brett, but it's like this whole kind of
antagonistic.
Yeah, that kind of stupid. It's like a dick measuring competition. So there was that, and then for the last half of it, it's character-wise he takes a backseat to Sarah, because Sarah's just a much more powerful character. But also the whole thing of well, my plan is good. I'm going to show you my plan is good, and it's like you have no idea what you could have done. You could have killed them all just because you got a bit annoyed that someone told you your plan wouldn't work, or your plan was a bit simplistic. It's like, again, there is at least 1,000 years worth of technological advanced learning in this room with you, just from Sarah alone. God knows about the Doctor. Just park it. Just park the ego for 1 second. And then even at the end, when it's like when they're searching for the Doctor in the underground base, and then there's this whole thing about we'll find the Doctor, and it's just like, dude, would you just shut up? Like you're telling her to be quiet, yet you're the one talking really loudly.
Yeah.
In number 2 is the massacre, because yes, it is the Stephen Taylor show. He's the least interesting thing about this story. For me, the entire story is carried by all the supporting characters. Stephen makes a big huff about the Doctor not trusting him to look after himself in Paris. He's gone 20 minutes when his, again, I would say ego gets in the way, and he you don't have the right money, and you're causing a fuss. You're bringing undue attention to yourself. Then you're a wanted person, and you decide to rifle through someone's drawers to find a pen and paper, as opposed to waiting and giving yourself a chance to explain yourself. And then finally, or not finally, second finally, I suppose 1.5, you lambast the Doctor for his actions like you know better.
Yeah.
Your big experience with death has been the Daleks' Master Plan. You saw the loss of Katarina and Sarah, and that's horrible. They died in horrible ways. But this is something like the Doctor has seen this on multiple occasions, and especially not with people he's connected. He's seen history happen, and he can't risk that changing. Stop acting like you know better. And then the last thing is he makes a big song and dance about leaving, and he comes back into the TARDIS. He physically comes back into the TARDIS. The last one then is the gunfighters. I'm just going to say fuck everything about Stephen in that story. And that is my 3-2-1.
Cool. Listening to you talk about the massacre, I think, personally speaking, the massacre is one of my least favorites. But the reason why I put it in the middle was I was trying to separate my personal feelings from if you were a fan of the character. Personally, the massacre can go rot in a ditch as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, I can understand, like, all the points that you made they're totally valid. And, yeah. I think I've just purged the gunfighters from my memory, to be honest, at this point. My worst episodes, I had 2, and similar to my best episodes, these were just my worst episodes for me. Yeah. My middling episodes were me trying to be a bit nice. My worst episodes, though, are me. And going from the one where he annoyed me the most to the one where he annoyed me the least to the one where he annoyed me the most, my number 2 pick for his worst episode was actually Galaxy 4.
Right.
Because Galaxy 4 was the first episode for me. So the Time Meddler, I kind of gave him a little bit of a pass.
Yeah, because
we were only getting to know him or whatever, do you know? Galaxy 4 for me, he contributes nothing. Let's face it, he actually contributes bugger all. All of his attempts to turn the Draven against their leader or whatever, it amounts to nothing. It's not like he actually got a gun or managed to do anything. His whole thing with the airlock is just him being a freaking idiot. You know, I'm going to leave. Oh wait, I can't get out the door. Oh no, she's locked the other door. Well, that was a bad plan. It's like, dude, you're aware of how spaceships work. You used to pilot one. Like, what the hell? And in the second half, and actually in the last episode, really, it's the countdown. How long do we have? Are you sure? And it's like, I can understand maybe being a bit mistrustful of the Rills based on what the Draven have described. If you didn't spend the previous 3 episodes in the Draven's company to see what they are like as people and realize they're massive xenophobes and they were probably exaggerating, or in the case of Marga, just lying. It's like, the Doctor trusts the Rills, Vicky trusts the Rills, but no, you know better. You know better. You can suss out what's going on here. No, Stephen, nothing was going on. Absolutely nothing. This was probably the most benevolent person you could have ever come across in your entire life.
Yeah.
The Rills were perfectly happy to let themselves be destroyed if it meant giving you time to go back to your ship. They're probably the nicest beings in the galaxy, and you were a dick to them for reasons I will never comprehend. And my worst episode for Stephen is the Daleks Master Plan. The 1 or 2 moments he has that I liked, so I mentioned earlier, like, again, he does ask about Vicky at the beginning and he's very concerned for her, but oh my god, his ego cannot be contained. And the way he treats other people because of his own ego running rampant, the hypocrisy of berating Brett like there's no tomorrow for leaving without the Doctor, when not even noticing that he was doing the same thing later, and he didn't even notice that Sarah went back. And that to me kind of showed that, like, while, you know, we saw the Doctor trusted Sarah and clearly cared about her a great deal, you know, by the time we got to the end of the Daleks Master Plan. If that had been Vicky, Stephen would have noticed that she ran off.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He got all the way back to the TARDIS, went inside and stayed there, as opposed to going back. Now, obviously the impact of him going back would have been that he would have died, and that would have been obviously a terrible outcome. But it's like, he's such a hypocrite. He is such a hypocrite. And just his ego and just the entire way that he behaved, and putting on the police officer's uniform and going into the, like, what was going through your brain? Do you know? So for me, Dalek's Master Plan is my worst episode for him. The reason why I didn't include the gunfighters is, to be honest, the gunfighters is a bad story for everybody.
Yeah.
Do you know? Whereas, you know, Galaxy 4, the Rills were interesting. You know, Dalek's Master Plan, the Doctor was great, Brett was great, Sarah was great, and Stephen just sticks out like a sore thumb. So, Gunfighters is not his worst episode for me. It's just a terrible episode for everybody. So that would be the difference.
I just like the Galaxy 4 thing. You know, we use the airlock scenario in different mentalities. Don't remind me of Captain America and Iron Man, he was like, you wouldn't lay down the wire. No, I would just cut the wire.
Yeah. I will always be Team Iron Man all the way, by the way. Because screw Cap and his self-righteousness. So, going back to Stephen, I think this was a sort of challenge. This was certainly a challenge for me coming up with this list, because he's a character I'm not a fan of. And I tried to sort of put down a sort of an overall idea why I don't like him. And what I came up with is that Stephen is a product of a producer who did not like William Hartnell. If you think about The Chase, if you think about The Time Meddler, he's kind of annoying, but he's not too bad. But when John Wilds came in, Stephen started becoming more to the forefront and more of the strongman of the group. And it didn't hit. He was trying to replace Hartnell in as many scenes as possible, and it didn't work. The Ark being an example. Why have him be the one to go and tell them what's happening? He doesn't have a clue. They present him as the hero, but in my opinion at least, more often than not, he just comes across as bumbling and annoying. You can't get behind a hero who doesn't do heroic deeds. And I think the biggest thing that got in my goat at the end is the man we hear described at the end of The Savages, this great leader who will unite these people, is not the man we saw on screen. Or at least not the man I saw on screen. Like, if you compare his exit in The Massacre, right, where he left for 5 seconds and came back, the Doctor was simply happy that he took the time to look at the screen to make sure he wasn't walking into a fucking volcano.
Yeah.
That was the most the Doctor could say about Stephen at that point in time, was at least he bothered to look at the screen. That was the height of Stephen's intelligence. And yet somehow, 5 stories later, oh, no one is good enough for this job but Stephen. He's a perfect fit. I didn't see the progression of his character from The Massacre up to The Savages for that to be a worthwhile exit. And for him to get such praise and such a happy ending and, you know, a good exit scene when you have Vicky who didn't, Dodo doesn't even, like, we'll talk about that next week, but like Katarina got airlocked. You know, Sarah got aged to the point where she became dust, and Stephen becomes king of a planet, and it just rubs me all the wrong way.
When we get to, like, I think we'll probably discuss it like when we discuss Dodo's thing, but for me, this has been a run now of where I'll say long-standing companions, because like there's the idea as to whether Katarina should be considered a companion or not versus Brett being considered a companion or not, and then there's like Sarah, because she only exists in one story, but again she's there for 8+ episodes.
Yeah,
and it's this thing of that, with the exception of Katarina and Sarah, we've had 2 departures now for long-standing companions that are very poorly written. Now I know that for Vicky there was obviously there was background stuff going on, but I think the challenge would have been to write a suitable ending for the person that you've got. Like, it's not like this character is brand new. You have X amount of time to work this character to their strengths, so give them an ending that befits their strengths. And again, with Stevens, I don't see that ending as being justified at all.
Yeah, but that's just our opinion, you know. Stephen did not sit well with us, but there are plenty of people who Stephen is their favourite character. And to be honest, right, as much as I've ragged on Stephen for the last, how many weeks?
A lot.
Like the last 9 weeks, just giving out about him almost constantly. I would still love to meet Peter Purvis.
Yeah, because again, like, for like all the work he's done in terms of, like, you know, still promoting the Doctor Who culture and everything about it. Like, you can separate. Like, I think Peter Purvis is one of the Who actors that you can actually separate from the character.
Yeah. So hopefully when coronavirus decides to bugger off at some point, and conventions start up again, if Peter's at one, maybe I might try and make my way over.
Yep, and we'll have just to see if his chin is as strong as it was back then, because my God, that thing could fucking crack concrete.
And on that note, why don't we call it there?
Cool, perfect. On Monday, we will have our regularly scheduled programming when the Doctor and Dodo encounter the War Machines. Yeah, exactly. Stop stealing my line.
Talk to you Monday.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.